Hello everyone, my name is Phil Spawn, and today I'll be talking about discontinued versions of Windows. It may be hard to believe, but Windows 8 was released over 10 years ago. Windows 8 was the successor to Windows 7, a very popular version of Windows. Microsoft introduced some bold innovations with Windows 8, but the response to its release was overwhelmingly negative. Addressing the criticism and improving other aspects of Windows 8, Microsoft released Windows 8.1 a year later. Now, I understand that many of us tend to be creatures of habit. Change can be difficult, especially in the modern world, because almost everyone is short on time. However, if you are still using Windows 8.1, it is urgent that you upgrade because Microsoft discontinued support for it in January of this year. And as a cybersecurity major at CCBC, it is my desire to educate those who are less technologically inclined about how to protect themselves on the internet. Those who still use Windows 8.1 or an older version of Windows should upgrade to Windows 10 or 11. Now, today we will examine the dangers of using an outdated version of Windows, the improvements of newer versions of Windows over Windows 8.1, and the process of upgrading. So let's begin with the drawbacks of using a discontinued operating system. Using an outdated operating system is both dangerous and pointless. Unfortunately, the old mantra, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, does not apply to computers. A study from 2021 indicates that 24% of Windows users were still using discontinued versions of Windows. That number may have decreased in the last 2 years, but there are still a significant number of people using outdated versions of Windows. Using a discontinued version of Windows endangers your computer and other computers on your network. Because if a serious security vulnerability is discovered on a discontinued version of Windows, there will be no updates to fix those vulnerabilities. People with malicious intent are always at work, so your computer is more vulnerable to malware viruses and security loopholes. Now, here's a good example. In 2019, a major vulnerability was discovered in Windows XP. There was an exploit in which hackers could infect machines with a worm. Now, what is a worm, you might ask? A worm is a type of virus that multiplies itself on your device and other devices on your network. This allows it to both overload your computer and it gives access to the attacker. So he can steal your information and ruin your computer and do all sorts of stuff. Now, when Microsoft ends its support for a version of Windows, many companies also drop support for their apps as well. For example, Google Chrome no longer functions on Windows 8.1. Steam, which is a video game seller, is ending support for Windows 7 and Windows 8 in January of 2024. Microsoft's apps like Office 365 and Edge are no longer supported. Office's desktop apps will still function, but will no longer receive updates. Also, Edge and Office's web apps will no longer function at all. So now that we have established that continuing to use discontinued versions of Windows is both dangerous and pointless, let's compare Windows 8.1 with its successor, Windows 10. So, as with most things, the new usually tries to improve over the old. Windows 8.1 had some pretty good features over Windows 7, and those good features were carried over to Windows 10. And I understand that you may be fond of Windows 8.1 or an older version, but the newer versions of Windows have a lot of improvements to offer. For the sake of brevity, I will be comparing Windows 8.1 with Windows 10. And you'll be happy to know that Windows 10, as I said before, retains most of Windows 8.1's good features, some of which are the Windows Store. The Windows Store was introduced in Windows 8. Windows 8 and still exists in Windows 10. The live tiles of Windows 8 are still present in Windows 10, albeit in a much more desktop-friendly fashion. Task Manager saw significant improvements from Windows 7 to Windows 8, and those improvements were carried over to Windows 10. and also some security features that were introduced in Windows 8, such as uh, BitLocker full disk encryption, UEFI secure boot, excuse me, improved biometric authentication, and Windows Defender's antivirus capabilities are all present and improved upon in Windows 10. So new features, we have the task view feature, which is new to Windows 10. It brings integrated virtual desktops to Windows. Now, you may not know what a virtual desktop is, but what it does is allows you to have a second desktop for when you are trying to do multiple things at once, which is super useful for multitasking. And then we have the redesigned user interface. A large criticism of Windows 8 was that Microsoft was trying to treat a desktop like a mobile device. Windows 10 introduces a completely redesigned user interface. The pop-up start menu has been restored, replacing Windows 8's controversial start screen, and the universal Metro apps now run like normal desktop applications. Another feature, Cortana, is Microsoft's assistant that's powered by artificial intelligence. If you're a fan of Siri and Alexa from smartphones and home assistants, then you'll like Cortana in your operating system. So now that we understand the dangers and drawbacks of using a discontinued version of Windows, let's look at the process of upgrading to a current version. So the process of upgrading from Windows 8.1 to Windows 10 or Windows 11 is pretty easy. And while some of you may think it's difficult, it's not. It's a fairly simple process, and there are many guides on the internet to help walk you through it. There are two versions of Windows that are still supported currently, as I said before, and those are Windows 10 and 11. Windows 10, which is currently the most popular, will be supported until October 2025. Windows 11 is the newest version, and it does not have an official end-of-life date yet, but many people are holding off on upgrading to Windows 11 because it was disappointing when it launched. It has been improved, but if you are on older hardware, Windows 10 might be the better option. Which version of Windows you upgrade to depends on how long you plan to keep your current computer and how powerful and modern the hardware is. So upgrading is as easy, as downloading the Windows 10 installation media on Microsoft's website. This is a free application that installs Windows on your computer. Next, you just run the program and select upgrade this PC now. And while the free offer to upgrade to Windows 10 is technically expired, if you use the same Microsoft account associated with your computer, you should have a license associated with your account that should work to give you a free Windows 10 upgrade. So while the end of life of Windows 8.1 might be disappointing to some, its successors are superior and the upgrade process is simple. Those who use discontinued versions of Windows, as I said before, should upgrade to one that is still supported. It is dangerous and pointless to use one of the discontinued versions of Windows because they no longer receive security updates, are no longer supported by many apps, are outclassed by their successors, and are easy to swap out for a current system. Today, I urge you to be proactive about your safety on the internet. Having the latest security updates is very important. If you cannot upgrade to a current operating system, consider buying a new computer, upgrading your current one, or switching to a more operating system like Linux, although that might be a little bit more difficult for those who are not as technologically inclined. If you cannot upgrade to a supported version of Windows and you still need the files on your computer, disconnect it from the internet. Internet hackers are not a threat when there is no internet. And if you have friends or family who still use old versions of Windows, pass this information on to them because there can be serious consequences if they get hacked. And here are my references. All right, thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation.